right. That should send the video out to Twitch, and I'm just trying to get it to load up on my phone. The Twitch client got updated on my phone, and now I'm just trying to find where it shows me live or not. Oh, there we go. It shows me live. Say hi when you. Okay, so tonight's goal is to talk about virtual machines, Ubuntu Linux a little bit more, and to give you a preview of the midterm, which, with it being week 6, will actually be starting next week. And it will be a couple week long project. Most of what you're going to be doing for homework this week includes practicing what we focused on in the previous live stream. Together we installed Ubuntu, and then I think you tried it on your own, and you ran a couple other VMs on your own. I've spoken with many of you already, troubleshooting a few things that came up along the way. I have a hunch that one of the issues that came up last week for at least one or two of you might have been with the network settings inside of VirtualBox. I'll just reiterate that if you find yourself practicing setting up Ubuntu this week and you can't get to the web page hosted on your virtual machine, it's likely because you created a new VM in Bridge or in NAT mode, because that's what it defaults to. And NAT mode operates a lot like a router does. So if you think about how your internet comes into your house and you have a router and your computers all plug into that router, that allows all of your computers to share one internet connection. And in fact, if someone were trying to visit your home computer, the IP address that they would type in would be an IP address that goes to that router. And you would actually have to configure the router to pass certain ports into the computers on your network. By default, the router protects all of your computers, makes it look like one entity is reaching out to the internet. Bridge mode, on the other hand, and that's actually that NAT mode is what your VirtualBox is doing, is it's creating one network that's private for all of your virtual machines to use, and what you see from all your other devices on your network and even your desktop machine or your laptop is just one IP address being shared by all of those virtual machines. If you switch it to bridged mode, it gives a pretend MAC address, a pretend network card to the virtual machine, and it gets its own IP address from your router at home. So it looks like yet another computer has joined your network at home. And that allows you then to type in that IP address on any computer that's on your network. So that could be obviously the PC or laptop that you're using, but also your phone. If you're on the Wi-Fi network at home, you should be able to get to your virtual machine running the website that you've uploaded. So that's the end goal that I hope you'll be able to try out this week when I ask you to install Ubuntu again. Let's talk about that assignment. It's called the Ubuntu VM Time-Lapse Challenge. You're going to be doing basically everything that we did in the outline last week. You'll be creating a virtual machine, installing Ubuntu, creating your user account, having it partition the drive, having it install the SSH software, having it install the web server. And then you're going to be logging in, hopefully connecting to it over PuTTY with SSH, and then setting some permissions, creating a web page, uploading that maybe with WinSCP or another FTP program. But when you do that, the second time, you're going to be feeling hopefully a lot more confident, and you'll be piecing together more parts of it than before. I've installed Ubuntu so many times, but every time that I do it, I get a little bit faster, a little bit better at understanding what's going on. I'll read another part of the screen, and it will mean something different to me. So that's what I'm trying to expose you to in these exercises. When you're in the flow and setting all this up, I hope that you will remember to take screenshots along the way. And there's keyboard commands that you can use on Mac and PC to take those screenshots. There's the snipping tool in Windows, and I think now it's being replaced by yet another tool inside of Windows for taking screenshots. And if none of those shortcuts work for you, you can always just take your phone and take photos of your computer as you're setting it up. Just checking the chat here, seeing if anyone. Oh, there's the video for this week. Oh, this week we're being brought to you by car. That's pretty cool. Some sort of Twitch branded car. Honda is sponsored by Twitch. That's amazing. I had no idea. So take screenshots along the way. When you're done and you've got everything working, take those screenshots, go back through them. I would recommend that you put them into a Google Slides presentation. And we've done this in other exercises in Web 1. When you make that slideshow presentation, there's that area along the bottom that lets you type in speaker notes. That's a perfect place for you to describe what's happening in each screenshot that you took, just so that I understand that you know what you were doing along the way. And of course, getting those screenshots in the right order will be helpful. But this is your chance to review, practice, and then share with me how it went. The other aspect of Linux and virtual machines that you'll be working on this week is just researching. I provided a couple resources last week, mainly that article from DigitalOcean, but Linux is so popular that there's thousands, if not millions, of other resources about it out there. And so what I've done is throughout the years I've collected and bookmarked a few resources that I thought were really good on using command line interfaces. And I'd like you to pick a few of those to focus on and go through. And then summarize in your independent learning journal what resource you used or what resources you used. Talk about the command line programs that you used as part of that resource. They'll have you doing similar things to what we've done already, and they might have you venture out into installing different programs and using different command line tools. I want you to summarize what options or flags. So those are those things that came after the name of the program you're running. So when we typed the ls program, by default, that lists folders and files in a multi-column display. And if you wanted to change that to be a single long list of all the details about what's in that directory, you can type ls, put a space, and then a dash. And the flags are L for list mode and A for all. And that will show you many more files, many more details about those files. And so the key part there is many of the programs that you run, you can control what they output or how they behave by passing flags and options afterwards. And here's the main reflection inside of the journal. I want you to think about a way that you might see yourself using a command line program to save time as a web developer. Our chapter from last week had a few hints in there for using programs for packaging up your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but there's lots of other ways that you could use the command line tools to help you along the way. One thing that I've actually learned over the past couple semesters to make me better at grading actually is I can download the zip file from Moodle that has everyone's work for an assignment. And before, I had to double click and open up everyone's zip file in order to see their assignment. I found through some Googling and some reading of the manual page for some unzip commands that there's a way to recursively unzip all the zip files inside of one zip file. So I've actually been piecing together a command in a text document on my computer that I refer to when it's midterm grading time or finals grading time. I will grab that out because I'm downloading this big zip file that has dozens of zip files inside of it, and I can run one command and it does all this for me. So start thinking like that. Is there a particular thing that's very tedious to do with the mouse that you could do from the command line? And one thing that I'm just still learning about is that you can actually control a web browser from the command line. So I showed you how you could use links to browse the web. There's actually a project called WebDriver available for Chrome and Safari that actually let you remote control a web browser and test that clicking on a certain link takes you to a certain page, or allows you to automate filling in a form if you wanted to test whether a website is working. And I have to apologize for my dogs. They're all playing right underneath my feet right now, which is only mildly distracting. So far, they're being pretty quiet about it, but I'm sure that's going to change here soon. Okay, so those are the two main assignments. There's one other question that I wanted to be sure to address tonight. When I asked for your questions in Slack, someone replied asking, could you just explain what Linux is? And I feel so silly that I don't have a resource that just introduces the concept of Linux. Um, it's an operating system is how I replied in Slack. And what that means is instead of you buying a computer and it coming with a copy of Windows that runs for a couple years and then you might have to pay additional money to upgrade that to a new version of Windows. Linux is an operating system all on its own that can be installed on many types of computers and allows all of the pieces of hardware to work together, from the hard drive to the memory to the Wi-Fi to Bluetooth. It has all the drivers needed to actually run software. And I like to say that it's free. It's definitely open source. It's free in that you can get versions of Linux that you don't have to pay for. You can also spend money on Linux as well. But it's an alternative operating system that you can run on many computers that are out there. So back 10 years ago, I might say that could save you money if you didn't want to have to license Windows 10 or the latest version of Mac OS. But nowadays, I think that the more popular usage of Linux is for someone that wants to really customize their experience, because you can get so many different types of window managers, which are like the GUI that you use to browse, to run Chrome and to run all of your favorite apps. You can get a much more customizable version of that GUI inside of Linux. And it's even more popular on servers because you can actually pick and choose exactly what gets installed on that operating system. So you're not running a bunch of software that is just slowing down your slowing down your server. So the reason that I have you install Linux inside of a virtual machine is to have you practice installing a server operating system that has no GUI. It just operates from the command line. And it allows you just to install the few packages that we need to host websites, including Apache, OpenSSH, and a few more that we're going to get into in the coming weeks here. But when you think about it, we're just installing a couple pieces of software. We're not installing all the graphics drivers used to play games. We're not installing Office. We're not installing a bunch of the other stuff that comes with a desktop computer that you normally use. That allows the server to be very lightweight, and in the cloud, it means that the servers that they set up, that company set up for you to use, can actually host lots of different copies of Linux running and hosting websites. So if you were to try to buy your own web host, and I have been using a web host for several years as part of the web class called Linode. The Li actually means Linux. These are virtual machines, that's what the nodes are, that you can pay just a little bit of money. At the time of this recording, they have plans that start out at $5 a month for hosting. And that's a lot. The reason that they can do this is that they're only running enough hardware to run really small copies of computers for you. They come with 1 gigabyte of RAM, 1 CPU core, and then the network connection and storage that you need to host a website. It's not highly provisioned. They're very small, lean machine programs. You're not going to be able to run games on this. You're going to be running just the software needed to host websites. And that's all because of Linux. All of these web hosts run on top of Linux. And as I was reading the Wikipedia page for Linux, and the reason I pulled this up, besides showing the beautiful penguin logo that represents Linux, his name is Tux, is the fact that Linux is embedded in so many of the devices that we buy in our house now with the smart home. From things like the Chromebooks, which are out there, those actually run a Linux-based kernel, to the thermostat that I have in my house. It's running on top of something that is Linux. So Raspberry Pis, you can buy like a $30 computer that's just a couple circuits on a board that you could customize to have sensors on and different screens on. All of that is possible to run on such cheap equipment because of the open source and fast nature of Linux. Of course, if you have an Android phone, you're using something that's based on Linux, and there's aspects of the iPhone that are even based on top of packages that were first made available for Linux. So Linux as a whole is an operating system, much like Mac OS or Windows or iOS or Android, and so much of the world has been built on top of Linux that I think it's important that you as a web developer have exposure to it in its command line form so that you can be ready to host websites. So I hope that answers the question of what is Linux. And if not, please let me know in Slack and I will try to find another way to describe it. Possibly a more visual way, kind of like this image of Tux. All right, let me check my outline, see what else I want to talk about tonight. We talked about Linux. We talked about those network modes inside of VirtualBox. We already talked about the timeline challenge. I think that's going to be a really fun way to capture um, your progress in setting up a VM. We talked about the independent learning journal. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you learn from those resources. The biggest difference between Web Design 2 and Web Design 1 is that there's lots of time for independent research. And I expose you to many different resources, and it's kind of up to you to pick what fits your learning style and give me feedback on how that helps you understand the main material. The rest of what we're going to be talking tonight is the midterm project. Yeah, it's only week 6, but we're talking about this because the timeline for the Web Design 2 midterm is a couple weeks, and the key part, as you'll see in the timeline, is that there's going to be due dates that are very important because there's going to be interaction between you and me for getting feedback, and interaction between you and a few other students to get feedback as well. And I want to make sure that we have a very smooth handoff process there. So I'm doing the best I can to get you ready for this project. You don't necessarily have to start building anything yet this week. I want you to be ready for the requirements that we've already learned about this semester, though. So let's get started. What are you going to be building for your midterm? I think it's a pretty fun project. It takes advantage of my love for food and my love for web design. You're going to be building a brand new website for a fictitious restaurant that I'm going to be calling Brandon's Bistro. I get to be your client, and I have hired you to build a new website for me for Brandon's Bistro. On this slide is a very heavily redacted look at a restaurant website, a restaurant that I love going to, but has some challenges in design and usability for its clients that try to come to the restaurant all the time. I'm a very opinionated person, as you can tell, and my opinions are even stronger when it comes to food and to my ability to get the food. So as you look at this restaurant website, think about how it compares to websites that you've used to try to find information about restaurants, because that's going to be important for you to improve upon this design based on your needs as a visitor to restaurant sites. Before I dive into the details of the requirements for the project, I want to explain to you how this fits in with what I promised you'd be learning about this semester. So let's take a look at our course outcomes. I think that this project builds on 5 of the main outcomes that I talked about at the beginning of the semester. The first one is you're going to be creating virtual machines with this project. You're actually going to be building the virtual machine as a web server to host your final project. So what you're practicing this week is definitely going to be used for you to host your midterm website in just a couple weeks. You're also going to be working with CSS and JavaScript frameworks. The key one here is Bootstrap. You're going to be using Bootstrap to build this website. You're also going to be evaluating and improving browser compatibility. When you take a look at this screenshot of the restaurant, it looks okay on this larger screen, on the desktop screen. I did not take a screenshot of what it looks like on a phone, but trust me when I say that it is not responsive. It does not reflow to fill the screen of a mobile device. So when I talk about evaluating and improving browser compatibility, the number one thing that this is going to call out to you is responsive design. Another aspect of this project will be using the principles of art and design, and start thinking how you can take the lessons that we've been learning from Jen Simmons in Layout Land to improve the design of this restaurant website. There's some real clear takeaways that I think will be pretty obvious as I start showing you a couple slides here. You're also going to be I'm also checking your understanding of terminology. So what does that mean in terms of your midterm project? Well, there are several aspects of the midterm project. Starting next week, in Moodle, there will be a quiz. It's a terminology quiz that's going to check your understanding of things that you've already taken quizzes on, and also a few terms based on your exposure to virtual machines over the last 2 weeks. By the end of week 7, the end of next week, so week 7 is going to open Saturday. By Friday, you will be expected to turn in a midterm draft. In between week 7 and 8, over that weekend, I am going to be available for conferences. And I'm going to ask that sometime next week in week 7, you sign up for a time slot, and you and I are going to meet either through Google Hangouts or maybe Zoom. I haven't decided which platform we're going to use for meeting, but I will provide a way for you and I to video chat and take a look at your project together. Then by the end of week 8, so in the end of 2 weeks, you will be turning in the final draft based on my feedback and your iterations of the project. That leaves much of week 8, besides the refinements based on my feedback. I need you to dedicate a lot of time to setting up your web server. The good news is that in many ways, step 5 is actually going to be the easiest because you've practiced it not only last week, but this week as well. The midterm is going to stretch into week 9. I'm trying to look at my dogs to silently tell them to stop what they're doing. Come here. Here we go. The first live stream appearance by my little puppy named Ember. And now all the other dogs are right behind her. No. She has words. The midterm is going to stretch into week 9. Early on in week 9, you're going to be giving a presentation. In an online class, that's kind of a challenge. What we're going to try to do is have everyone record a video, if possible, of them showing their project to a client. If that doesn't work, we have the ability to create slideshows with screenshots, but I'd really like us to be able to record ourselves presenting and pitching the revised design to the client. Part of that will be demonstrating the website and clicking through it to show how it works, but also pointing out how you've solved some of the design problems, whether that's shrinking the window to make it responsive, or a few of the other things that we'll talk about on the next slides. The one part of that video that's probably the least like a pitch to a client is that you're going to be also explaining how your site is being hosted for the project, and that's going to be reflecting on how you set up the virtual machine to host the website. At the end of week 9, and this is where the timing is going to become very important, there's going to be a forum activity where we're going to be doing a critique like we did in Web Design 1. Everyone is going to be posting their presentation video, providing the screenshots and the recorded walkthrough of their midterm. We're going to try to have everyone provide feedback and explain what they like and provide suggestions throughout that week. I'm looking forward to the critique because I know everyone did this as part of Web 1, and we did a critique at the midterm and final project stages of last semester, and we're going to be a lot better this semester, having practiced that a few times. And the midterm is such that we all have the same prompt, but I know these designs are going to look so unique compared to each other than even the Zen Garden looked like before. So what is this project going to entail? I'm going to put on the client hat here and tell you the things that a client would tell you if they were asking you to build a restaurant website. What I have to share with you is my menu. At Brandon's Bistro, we serve grilled cheese, chicken strips. I mean, what restaurant can't choose chicken strips? Hot wings, and mozzarella sticks. I'm sharing that with you so that you don't go too crazy with lots of food options. Focus on these 4 things as primarily what Brandon's Bistro is known for. If I'm your client, I'm likely going to be telling you and giving you some materials that I already have. I would be giving you a logo, telling you what my colors are, giving you the name of the restaurant and my contact info, perhaps showing you the existing web page like that screenshot earlier, giving you either a paper copy or a PDF of my menu already, and a few photos that you can slap in there. In an odd twist, I'm not giving you any of these. I'm telling you that these things exist for my Brandon's Bistro, but what I actually like you to do is come up with these on your own. I'm challenging you to come up with a logo. If you're an art major, you might whip out Photoshop or Illustrator as an opportunity to build a logo. But even if you don't want to use a program like that to design a graphic logo, what you can do is use typography and a little basic CSS to make a logo that's simple and appropriate for the web. Some of my favorite logos out there are based on typography alone, or a treatment of the B and the B in Brandon's Bistro. Or perhaps based on my menu, maybe there's something there that you could choose to be the logo for Brandon's Bistro. You have to come up with some sort of branding logo for this project. And choosing colors is kind of a part of any website, choosing the colors that are appropriate for a restaurant to have. I'm not asking you to build a PDF menu. To be clear, this is a website that you're building, so it's most likely appropriate for you to build a web page that serves as the menu for Brandon's Bistro. Putting my client hat back on, I've met with many clients for web design in the past, and what helps me a lot is to know what they're envisioning when they are hiring me to work on a website. They likely have at the top of their mind a few websites that they visit a lot that will serve as inspiration, or perhaps their competitors or restaurants that they aspire to be like. For this website, I wanted to share 3 that I think are great. Let me click on them to open them up right now, starting with Buffalo Wild Wings, but also El Burro and Sugar Fire Pie. As they're loading here, they always change just a little bit before each semester. You'll see that they look a lot better than the existing Brandon Bistro website. What I like to think about as I look at these, when I'm looking at the websites that a client has given me, is why could the client have given these to me? What stands out? What is similar about all 3 of these web pages? And as I'm tabbing back and forth between all 3 of these, one thing is very clear. Every one of these websites features food. And if I go back to the original screenshot of Brandon's Bistro's website right now, I feel that food is actually lacking. Yeah, there's a few small photos of food, but there are some vibrant, big, beautiful imagery being used on all 3 of these websites, from Buffalo Wild Wings to Sugar Fire Pie. That's something that is a clear takeaway. The other thing that I think is unique is that there is a font that is paired with their brand really well. So Buffalo Wild Wings has this all caps sans serif that they use for most of their headlines. Everything is bold, thick lines. The contrast with the black and the yellow is there throughout the entire page. That contrast is actually pretty similar to this Mexican street food page. There's definitely thick black used for the important text on the page, and that continues as you scroll down. But there's also these vibrant colors, and the use of white space is incredible. Now, there's no white on this page right now, but there's definitely a lot of space being used to separate out content. I think that that's important for a restaurant website. If you go back to the screenshot of the existing website, there's not a lot of active white space that's used to separate and organize the content. I think that's something that you can improve upon. Sugar Fire Pie is probably the one site that looks the most like Bootstrap, but they definitely have a lot of active white space as well. Here's some text that's set off to the side with an image over on the right. They have these long horizontal sections of content that have plenty of white space above and below. And they have fun shapes that call out the staff that work at this. I think this is also a fictitious bakery, but this type of layout that has flow. So like there's organized sections and regions on the page that stack on top of each other and then are laid out side by side. I think that's something that you can use to design a really good restaurant website. So definitely look at the examples that your client has provided that they like. There's something you can learn from there, and there's more than what I just spoke about. A requirement for any website, and especially for Brandon's Bistro, is to make a navigation bar. Now, I'm your client. I'm going to tell you that I want my hours, my menu, and my about page listed on the nav bar. When it comes for you to implement this, you are free to change that a little bit, but you definitely want to make sure that the client's needs are met. What I will tell you is that in this nav bar, you don't have to create links that go to separate pages. If you take a look at Sugar Fire Pie or El Burro, you'll see that these are actually really tall web pages, and it's perfectly fine for you to create links that jump down to different regions of the web page for this project. If I'm your client, I'm going to tell you why I'm hiring you. These are the problems that I am trying to solve as your client. I'm going to articulate them very clearly. I will give you the disclaimer that sometimes it's not as well articulated from clients what they want. Let me try to be very clear, though. I am getting complaints that people cannot find the hours or phone number to call on Brandon's Bistro website. Here's that screenshot again. This is a restaurant website. Are my hours clear? Is my phone number on the page? My biggest pet peeve about any restaurant website is that I can't find the phone number to call. That is something that you need to solve when you design this website. The other problem that I want to solve is I'm getting complaints that this doesn't work on mobile phones. So I already told you that you'll be using Bootstrap. You need to make a mobile first design that works just as well on mobile and has all the important information, but also works well on bigger screen sizes as well. The other complaint that I'm trying to address is that I've heard it's hard to read the menu on my website. I think that this goes along nicely with what I talked about with this big, well-organized, high contrast, active white space design that is framing the menus on these other restaurant web pages. You'll want to keep these problems in mind and maybe write them down to be your guiding lights as you're building this project. And you want to keep them in mind because in your presentation at the end of week 9, you're going to need to explain to the client how you have chosen to solve the problems that they provided you. So definitely keep these in mind as you're making decisions for your project. Beyond the client requirements, I'm your instructor and I have a few things that I'm looking for you to do in this project specifically. Number 1, I'm looking for you to use Bootstrap 4. I think Bootstrap 4 provides a lot of great foundation for you to build upon. There's definitely the risk, as Jen Simmons has talked about in Layout Land, of building too many sites that look a lot alike because they use Bootstrap. I think that with just a little bit of your own CSS, though, you can change the colors, change maybe some sizes. That will allow you to use a lot of the free Bootstrap classes that they give you for layout, but then make it so it doesn't look like you just copied and pasted the markup from the Bootstrap website. A little bit of customization goes a long way. The second major requirement is that you are going to be implementing a grid design using the Bootstrap grid. And I know this was one of the hardest things that we've worked on so far. This is going to be something that you want to practice or start working on right away and get feedback from me so that we can figure out which parts of your web page are great for applying a grid. Going into this, what I see students do the most often is for their menu to use the different size columns on different size grids for like mobile and desktop to lay out the menu using the grid design. That works really well. I've said it a few times. I'm going to say it one more time that the site has to be responsive. And when I am grading, what I'm going to be looking for is that you are resizing and reordering content on the mobile screen size. Remember that you could have like a 4-column design, but on mobile, maybe it's 2 columns or 1 column and they rearrange and stack differently. I'd like you to play around with that. Additionally, I'd like to make sure that you have content that appears only on mobile at a certain place on the page. And I've tried to be subtle about this before, but I'll be very frank this semester. I'm looking to see something at the very top of the page on mobile. I'm always looking for the phone number when I'm trying to contact a restaurant. So this semester, I'm going to be very clear that you should probably find a way to make those Bootstrap classes that allow content to appear on only one screen size, add the phone number to the top. When I'm grading on the rubric, there will be aspects of the rubric that are related to answering your client's requests and solving their problems, so keep those in mind. And finally, I'm going to be checking to see that you have actually run your website on a web server using Ubuntu, VirtualBox, and Apache. So those are the instructor requirements. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat room tonight. If questions come up, please feel free to put them in Slack and I'll reply so that everyone in the class can see my answers. I think this is a pretty fun project. I look forward to seeing what you put together for this restaurant website. It's a good chance to use Bootstrap but customize it to fit your needs. Let me double check my outline to make sure there's no other topics I wanted to talk about. In my previous live stream from last semester, I asked students what they were most nervous about when it came time to work on the midterm project. And overwhelmingly, the thing that people focused on was that midterm quiz. It's going to be open book. It's going to be a mix of multiple choice and open-ended. I don't think it's going to be the most stressful part of this project, but I understand that that's something that is more of an unknown for you going in. It will be posted next week and you'll have all week to work on it. Another question that's come up regularly is, where do I get images for this project? There are websites that you can use for getting free images to use. One that I've linked to in past semesters is Unsplash. These are images that are free for you to use, completely free. I do think that they prefer that you provide credit for some of the images, and you can do that in the alt text of the images that appear on your website or in the comments or even on the page, I'd be fine with that. The one challenge with using Unsplash is I don't think that there's many photos of food. There's definitely pizza, but when it comes time for something like hot wings, the last time I searched on here, a bunch of birds came up, and this year it looks like planes are coming up when I search for hot wings. Oh, but there we go. We got some celery and hot wings on the second row here. So there's definitely thousands of images available here, and there's a link to view the full size and download the free copies of the images if you'd like to include them in your project. Just try to provide credit to the artist who submitted it if you can. All right, so that is it for tonight's live stream. If you have questions, please share them, and I will see you next time.